sand flats at the end of the bay, and another great spot for prawning. But Calabash, keep it in mind also for night fishing for brim. Along the northern shore, very deep water, you can get in right in close, and on those dark moonless nights, great spot for fishing for brim right in close. About the middle of the tide, so no point fishing for brim, there's too much run in the water. So we've come over to the Milson Flats, Milson Island Flats. That's the island you can see there. This area right through here is mud and sand flats around about 3 to 4 metres depth, and a good chance of picking up a flathead or two on the drift. As you can see, it's also a good spot for the blue swimmer crabs. Those markers there are for witches' hats that have been put down by some of the other boaters. The rig I like to use when I'm drifting for flathead is a reasonably small ball sinker, a swivel, and a trace of the same line as the main line, and I like to use these 3-hook rigs. Now I've gone down a fairly small hook, so about a size 2, that have been linked up together, and I'm going to use white bait. So we just put the white bait on the 3 hooks. The 3 hooks help to hold the bait together, of course, because they tend to be a fairly soft bait, plus the fact that anywhere a flathead hits that bait there's a hook point and your chance of hook up are far greater. Keeps it nice and streamlined, and as we drift that white bait should swim through the water just the way the flathead expects to see it. This is a great spot, the vines. I love fishing the vines. See that shoreline behind me? That steep shoreline? Just imagine that disappearing into the water, going down about 10 to 11 metres and hitting the flat mud, sand bottom of the river. Along that junction line is where you'll find all the brim. They sit there feeding on all the food coming down. If you anchor around about 3 to 4 boat lengths out, that'll put you on the junction. This spot fishes just about all year long, but generally better in that period from February through to about April, I find anyway. We've just had about a week of fairly heavy rain, minor flood conditions, water's fairly dirty. We're fishing the run-out tide at the moment and doing pretty well, but under these conditions I tend to prefer the run-in tide because the cleaner water, I think, gets them on the bite a bit better. There's not so much rubbish coming down, tangling in your line. So, although generally, as a general rule, in most spots of the Hawkesbury River, the last couple of hours of the run-out tide are the best. When you get these minor flood conditions, sometimes that run-in tide can be better. Same rig as just about everywhere else, fairly long trace of a couple of metres, about a number 2.0 hook. The only difference during flood conditions and general conditions, instead of using nice fresh Hawkesbury River prawns, I tend to change over to something like chook gut or peeling the prawns, but chook gut particularly, it's very smelly, and under these dirty water conditions I think the fish have a better chance of finding the bait. So when the water's very discoloured, chook gut, number 1 bait. Just worked on this fella. If you haven't got a sounder in the boat, about 3 to 4 boat lengths out from the shore you'll find is you're on the edge of that drop-off. And I find that's where the brim gather. That edge, if you go along it, you'll find that it's very, very rugged. All the sandstone that's broken away from those cliffs has fallen down and finishes up on the bottom along that junction. Now that offers ideal conditions for brim. In fact, it gives them the 3 prime requirements for brim habitat. Gives them plenty of food, because those rocks hold all the fish, all the little fish that they'll feed on, the crabs, the sea life that grows on the rocks. It's also on the edge of the main channel of the river, on an outside bend, and as the prawns are coming down on their run, they're moving right along this edge. and there's plenty of food for the fish, so it offers them food. Second thing it offers them a bit of protection from the large predators. All those rocky crevices down there, they can get in there and hide from any of the larger fish, such as jewfish, even sometimes sharks. So it offers them protection, and it also offers them comfort. And don't laugh at the concept of comfort for fish. Like all creatures, if they can, they'll try and do it easy. Why sit out for 6 hours in a raging 2 or 3 knot current on the run-out tide if you can hide behind a rock in the eddy, in the comfort zone, and still get your food and your protection? With all spots on the Hawkesbury, there's no use fishing for brim unless you are prepared to put down a burley trail. It gets them on the bite and can put them in a feeding frenzy. Laying pellets or some of the commercially prepared burley, they all help to attract the brim to your bait and to the spot you've chosen to fish. You'll notice I'm using an Alvey reel. I like using the thread lines too, but direct control on the Alvey, 1-to-1 retrieve rate. You feel exactly what the fish is doing, playing straight to the hand. Thankfully, I've got reasonably heavy line on this. I've gone up to 7 kilo on this rod. Some of these thumper brim, here he comes. There we go. Here's one of our, here you go, about 1.2 kilo maybe. Certainly a kilo anyway, and that's what the Hawkesbury River is famous for. They're big brim. And the vines, probably the best place to catch them too. Well, this one just about finishes off a 3-hour session at the vines. We've got pretty close to our bag limit, and about at least half a dozen of them are about this size. I think that'll do us for the day. But it really has been fishing well today. We've had a week of rain. Water's fairly discoloured, and this is where all the brim are gathered, and we've managed to get a few. Chook gut certainly proved to be the best bait, which is fairly typical when the water's dirty. But time to take these home while they're nice and fresh. They're on the ice in the fish box. Fillet them down and boil into some lovely food with these brim, eh? Fantastic. The new expressway and old highway bridges that cross the Hawkesbury are a popular spot for anglers chasing big jewfish and brim. The pylons going into the water act as artificial reefs, and there's food attached to those pylons, such as oysters and barnacles. Bait fish are attracted to these artificial reefs, and they in turn attract the bigger fish. I find anchoring on the run-out tide under the new bridge and casting the pylons of the old bridge to be the best technique. The last hour of the run-out tide is definitely the best, and you could also anchor on the back end of the pylons and fish into the eddies. That's where the jewfish tend to gather. You'll also find on the northern side anchoring and fishing back into the pylons particularly good late in the evening and into the night. We're pulled up at Sanitarium Rock, about halfway along Long Island shore between the road and the rail bridges. As you can see by the sounder, this is a very prominent reef, and fishing the upstream side on a run-in tide can be very productive for big jewfish. Fishes all year round, but mainly during the summer. And as you can see, because we're only about 15 to 20 metres out from the island on the south side of the river, it's protected from southerly weather. So keep this in mind if the weather's not too good and if you're chasing a big jewfish. Sanitarium Rock on the Hawkesbury River. This is the famous Hawkesbury River Railway Bridge, where some very big jewfish are often caught, particularly on the Newcastle end of the bridge, between about the second and third pylons. Now those pylons act as artificial reefs, and you'll notice that the old pylons are still in the water too. The method of fishing, if it's a run-out tide, we anchor upstream from the pylons and fish back to the pylons. If it's a run-in tide, then we fish downstream and again back to the pylons. Those pylons just act as aggregators for the fish. Bait fish gather around them, and that attracts the bigger fish. Normal method is to fish around about 15 to 20 kilo line and slabber mullet, live bait, fresh squid, the bait to use. But this is probably one of the best spots for the big jewfish on the Hawkesbury River,